Shocking blind date. Struggling mechanic unexpectedly discovers true love with CEO's paralyzed daughter. Jake stood at the entrance of the lavish banquet hall, his work boots out of place against the polished marble floor. He had only agreed to his sister's insistence on the blind date out of a sense of obligation, but now all he felt was the weight of his life pressing down harder than the grease-stained overalls hanging in his garage. The murmurs of suit-clad executives danced around him, talk of mergers and acquisitions a distant echo of a world he didn't belong to. Contributing to the weight on his shoulders were the monthly bills, his family of 4 relying on him, a mechanic with a garage that felt like a ship slowly sinking. Was he truly just one setback away from losing everything he'd built? As he took a tentative step inside, the glimmering chandeliers seemed to mock his every move. Hands clammy, he ran his fingers through his hair, anxious and full of doubt. A waiting world opened up, filled with sharp-dressed men discussing profits, while he fought daily for just enough to keep his family afloat. How could he share the struggles of his life with someone so immersed in that high-stakes corporate swirl? A mechanical heart seemed to pound within his chest, sturdy yet vulnerable, twitching at the thought of revealing his truth. Then, he saw her. Emma. Her determined eyes shone with an uncommon light, hinting at a depth of emotion hidden beneath the polished surface of her designer dress. She might have looked the part of a COS daughter, but the flicker of uncertainty mirrored his own. "You don't belong here," he thought, recognizing that same wariness in her gaze. They exchanged introductions, and as they settled into a corner table, Jake felt a shift. Sharing the stories of their lives, the garage's engine roars and his father's teachings spilled out of him, weaving the threads of his world into hers. "People don't see me," she said with a hint of desperation. "They see the chair and think they understand." Beneath her graceful exterior lay scars of emotional battles fought silently, and with each word, Jake could feel their connection deepening despite their worlds standing light years apart. Before he could catch his breath, the atmosphere grew tense, a sudden hush falling over the room. Jake caught snippets of conversation from a group of executives just beyond the table promising to cut corners to squeeze more profits from their projects, indifferent to the environmental harm it would cause. His gut twisted. How could they disregard the lives affected by such greed? In that instant, he felt as if the shackles of loyalty to his own business and the need to protect his family curled tighter around his throat. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. His mind raced, caught in a storm of conflicting thoughts. Could he stand by in silence while knowing he could alert Emma and try to protect her but risk doing harm to his own livelihood? Her eyes searched his, imploring for understanding. Was risking everything worth protecting someone he barely knew but deeply connected with? The dinner's laughter grew distant, and as Jake's heart thudded against the confines of his chest, he realized something had to give. The aching uncertainty pressed down on him. Each breath labored with the enormity of choices unmade, futures unknown, and hearts adrift in a world of casual cruelty. Would he jeopardize the legacy of his father's garage for a flicker of justice? The tension peaked as their gazes locked, unspoken connection sparking between them. It was a crossroad, and would he find the courage to confront injustice when he could barely keep afloat himself? As the chatter in the room dimmed into muted exchanges, Jake felt the electric charge between him and Emma ignite an adrenaline rush. Choice loomed agonizingly between them, the safety of silence versus the moral imperative to speak. Each heartbeat echoed his internal struggle, reverberating louder than the dinner chatter. He took a sip of water, hoping that the coolness would soothe the rising panic. "Do you ever wonder what you might be sacrificing for the sake of others?" Emma's voice broke through his thoughts, steady but laced with genuine curiosity. He stared at her, seeing the vulnerability hiding behind her composed facade. This was his moment, the one that could shift everything. "I think about it every day," he admitted, the truth spilling out before he could second-guess himself. I'm always trying to make ends meet, to keep my family safe. But then there's this nagging question: am I selling out? Am I compromising my values just to get by? Her gaze softened, and in that fleeting second, he understood that she felt the weight of similar burdens. Tension hung in the air like a taut string. What about the world we could create if we challenge it? She pressed, her voice a mixture of hope and pleading. Jake wrestled with his own confusion. Could he really envision a future that went beyond mere survival? Was it reckless to light a fire in the heart of a corporate titan's playground? What if I lose everything, Emma? My business, my family's security? The thought of starting over, unsure if he could rise again, terrified him. Jake, she said quietly, it's about finding your voice, even when the odds seem against you. You have experiences that matter. The conviction in her words wrapped around him like a warm embrace, stirring a dormant yearning he hadn't fully acknowledged. Emma believed in him, or maybe she had unearthed the potential he had buried under the weight of responsibility. Could this blind date be about more than just two people connecting? Perhaps it held the key to his own transformation. Jake leaned in, seized by a newfound determination. If I do say something, what then? What will it change? It was as though he summoned the courage of generations of mechanics who had built their lives from nothing. It could change everything. Even if it doesn't go the way you hope, it allows you to stand up for something you believe in. That matters. Her words echoed like a siren call, stoking the embers of his desire to be more than what the world expected him to be. Their connection deepened under the hum of conversations around them. All of a sudden, he knew the direction he had to take, but it demanded vulnerability he hadn't allowed himself to explore. This moment, teetering on the precipice of action, beckoned him to step into the unknown, a process that surely would test everything he believed about himself and his choices. But before he could articulate a resolution, laughter erupted again from the executive table, loud and dismissive, masking yet another discussion of exploitative profit margins. A twinge of disgust twisted within him. Emma, he said, sealing the inner commitment coursing through him. I'll speak up. I have to. She smiled, a flicker of admiration and excitement dancing in her eyes, but the next words she spoke faded into the background noise. Jake's heart raced, nerves electrified by the prospect of an upcoming confrontation. What he now needed was a plan, a way to navigate this intricate web of power dynamics while ensuring his family's survival. But was he ready to tackle not just the corporate powers, but also his own fears? Just as the resolve set within him, a figure emerged from the crowd, Mr. Caldwell, the ruthless CEO himself, looking as if he owned the very room they stood in. The moment of confrontation was no longer hypothetical, it had arrived sooner than he expected. Would he dare face a titan head-on? Jake's pulse quickened as Mr. Caldwell approached, his imposing figure radiating an aura of authority that was difficult to ignore. The laughter and chatter around him faded into a soft murmur, the din of the restaurant seemingly lost to the whirlwind brewing inside him. He was acutely aware that every eye in the room flowed between them, the air charged with anticipation. Caldwell's steely gaze searched Jake's face, a probing look that seemed to sharpen the lines of his mouth into a thin, sardonic smile. I hear you've been making quite the impression tonight, he drawled, the smoothness of his tone clashing sharply with the contempt he exuded. Swallowing hard, Jake felt the weight of scrutiny he never experienced before. It was one thing to contemplate challenging authority in a private conversation. Facing it directly while under the spotlight was another beast entirely. His thoughts raced, an urgent kaleidoscope of strategies forming in a chaotic swirl. Yes, sir. I believe in standing up for what I see as just, Jake managed to affirm, the words barely escaping his mouth with the strength they needed. The conviction was there, but the underlying tremor of fear of the consequences gripped him like a vice. What would happen if he truly brought the conversation into the light? Just? Caldwell repeated, tilting his head slightly, a predatory glint sparking in his eye. That's a curious belief for someone in your position. Tell me, Jake, do you truly think a mechanic from the suburbs can influence the way we do business here? A wave of indignation surged within him. Did Caldwell realize what he had just implied? I think that anyone can make a difference, especially if they care enough to try. The words rang out stronger now, sounding less like a plea and more like a proclamation. Caldwell laughed, an unsettling sound that echoed around the room. Noble sentiment, really. But do you understand the rules of the game? He leaned closer, as if sharing a secret, his breath heavy with the scent of expensive cigars. Your job is to fix things, not to change them. Stick to your strengths, boy. Jake recoiled at that patronizing wisdom. He felt a sense of realization as he analyzed the CEO, so confident in his power and control. Jake had always blended into the background, the reliable one who fixed problems but never caused them. Now, that reality struck him like a heavy blow. What if he didn't just fix things? What if he became the catalyst for change, a repairman of not just engines but of moral guidelines? The thought was exhilarating, yet terrifying. I understand the rules, Jake responded slowly, gathering his resolve again. But sometimes, rules need to be broken to move forward. Caldwell's smile faded, replaced with a stern expression that hinted at the tightrope of power they were now standing on. Jake sensed the danger growing around them, but this was his pivotal moment. He didn't need to be the man Caldwell expected him to be. He could redefine who he was to himself. A flicker of uncertainty played across Caldwell's face, and for a moment, Jake believed he saw respect mingle with distaste. Maybe he had rattled the man. But that fleeting hope was tempered by the very tangible risk ahead. Would he be unceremoniously tossed out, not only losing the opportunity to voice his beliefs but jeopardizing his already tenuous grip on security for his family? No one likes being pushed, Jake, Caldwell warned quietly, narrowing the space between them until it felt stifling. You're playing a dangerous game. Jake took a breath, realizing that this moment was more than just about challenging Caldwell. It was a test of his own strength, a crucible that could forge him anew. As he caught Emma's gaze across the dimness of the restaurant, the flicker of confidence sparked again. He wouldn't let this chance slip away. Perhaps, he answered, steady and resolute, but sometimes it's essential to disrupt the status quo if we ever want to repair the world. The room held its breath, the tension so thick he could almost touch it. In that instant he grasped that standing up wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. What would the fallout be? It was uncertain. But perhaps clarity lay ahead, the echo of his voice breaking through the chaos. And just as the silent moment hung in the air, he realized that with this declaration came responsibility, perhaps even consequences that could fracture the life he knew. As Caldwell's expression hardened, the challenge in Jake's heart felt less like a naive dream and more like a battle cry. What would the next move be? He had dared to step out from the shadows. But as the stakes elevated, he knew he had to prepare himself for the fight that lay ahead. What truths would emerge if he continued this bold path? As Jake faced the lingering shadows of uncertainty, a fire ignited within him. Would he step forward, despite the fear that begged him to retreat? The tension in the air was palpable, a charged sensation that danced around Jake's skin as he felt Caldwell's unwavering scrutiny bore into him. In that stifling moment, Jake stood at a crossroads where self-doubt battled with an emerging resolve. He would either blend back into the shadows of compliance, or step boldly into the light of conviction and potential upheaval. As Caldwell turned to address a nearby group, Jake felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a boulder. Could he summon the courage to face the consequences of his declaration and, more importantly, explore what drove him towards this newfound defiance? Disrupting the status quo did not merely rest on lofty ideals. It demanded action, planning, and a clear vision of the future. The restaurant was a cacophony of chatter and laughter that felt worlds apart from the internal clamor inside him. He scanned the room, landing on Emma, her concerned gaze locked onto him. She offered a subtle nod of encouragement, a lifeline amidst the chaos. It sparked something in him, a flicker of loyalty for her and their shared hopes. The quiet conviction he felt around her steeled him for what lay ahead. If he were to embrace his potential, he could not do it from a place of fear. I need to think about my next move, he whispered to himself, breaking free of Caldwell's intimidating presence. The back of the restaurant offered a dimly lit corner where he could gather his thoughts, and confront the storm that had been unleashed within him. Weaving through the tables, he allowed himself a moment of solitude to collect his thoughts. In the relative quietness of the corner, Jake felt the adrenaline coursing through him. What had he actually ignited by pushing back? The flicker of respect on Caldwell's face had been fleeting, but it had been there, perhaps a sign that he wasn't the insignificant cog he'd always assumed he was. Jake mulled over the implications of that moment. He pondered the possibility that he could shift perspectives, not just his own, but those of others who may feel just as entrapped in the mechanisms of power. While Caldwell's world was entrenched in rules, Jake began to dissect the essence of those rules. They were constructs, after all, formed out of decisions from people, just as he was now deciding to challenge them. A deeper realization dawned upon him: if he dared to disrupt the norm, he could inspire others. They might just need someone to take the first step. Suddenly, the thought struck him with clarity: how could he influence change if he didn't start putting his plans into action? He had knowledge, skills, and a keen sense of justice. Perhaps that was enough. He envisioned what it might look like to align a small team within the company, a collective of like-minded individuals who believed in innovation and ethics over mere profit. Jake started shaping his vision, laying out a solid plan that would use every ounce of the courage he had summoned. It wouldn't be easy. Caldwell's shadow loomed large over the company, and any sign of rebellion would likely result in swift retaliation. But fear could not be the architect of his decisions. Instead, he would carve out a path even if it led through hostile territory. Just as his plan began to take form, a brief knock interrupted his thoughts. His heart quickened as he turned to see Emma, her expression a mixture of support and apprehension. "Jake," she began, stepping closer, "I heard what you said to Caldwell. I've never seen you stand up like that before. But are you prepared for what might come next?" Her question lingered, hanging heavy in the air. The enormity of what lay before him was undeniable. Could he withstand the fallout of his actions? Did he truly understand what it meant to risk everything to forge a new path? He took a deep breath and met her gaze, feeling the weight of his decisions crystallize into something definitive. "I don't know what's next, but I have to try. For us. For everyone else who thinks they don't have a voice. I can't go back to being the man who just fixes what's broken without trying to make it right." Emma's eyes widened with understanding, and a sense of determination kindled between them, igniting the moment into something new. But as his resolve solidified, Jake was abruptly reminded of Caldwell's earlier warning. Striking the first real blow against complacency was just the beginning, and he couldn't afford to underestimate the strength of the adversary he was challenging. The battle for change loomed before him, shadowed by uncertainty, and with that uncertainty came the promise of both peril and possibility. What would happen when he began to execute his plan? Would he rise to greatness, or would he discover just how fragile his resolve truly was? As these questions swirled in his mind, he understood action would come quicker than he anticipated, and he had to be ready to confront the storm ahead. The moment of truth was drawing near, and he would have to summon every ounce of courage to face whatever came next. The hum of the restaurant faded into the background as Jake took a moment to lock eyes with Emma before turning to face his own thoughts. The energy that coursed through him was both exhilarating and unsettling. The realization of his own agency stirred within him a mix of fear and anticipation. What if he faltered? What if his ambitions crumbled beneath the oppressive weight of Caldwell's regime? He closed his eyes briefly, envisioning the contours of his plan forming a network was essential, a delicate web of connections that would amplify their voices against the encroaching silence. But who could he trust? Caldwell had eyes everywhere, and the stakes were high. There was little room for error, and failure could unravel everything he hoped to build. "Start small," he murmured, opening his eyes and quietly absorbing the ambient sounds of the restaurant. "Find fellow believers." He rapped his knuckles against the wooden table, a symbolic tap which sent vibrations through him. The first step was identifying allies, those who shared his vision, who understood the need for a transformation in their stagnant environment. His mind retraced his colleagues, the regular faces he'd come to recognize in the office. Ellen from HR, sharp and compassionate, had often expressed her frustrations with the company culture. Carl from marketing had hinted at wanting to innovate beyond the monotony. Perhaps he could begin with them two passionate voices to help amplify his own. An unexpected resolve solidified in him. He slid out of the booth and positioned himself to face Emma, who was observing him closely. "I need your support," he confessed, his voice a whisper tinged with urgency. "Help me gather people I can trust, people who want more than just a paycheck." Emma's features softened, and she nodded. "Absolutely. But you must be careful. Each conversation could potentially endanger the mission," she interjected softly, her gaze searching his. "True. But it's all or nothing now," he affirmed, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. Emma didn't recoil, instead she leaned into his resolve. "You've already taken a massive leap. Let us make sure this is not just an act of defiance but a strategic move." The calculated nature of her words cast a new light on Jake's burgeoning defiance. He was not just revolutionizing his own life but potentially the lives of those around him. He found himself inspired, a rush of adrenaline strengthening his belief that genuine change was within reach. They spent the next few hours mapping out a loose plan, outlining conversations that needed to be had without arousing suspicion. Jake was meticulous, every detail weighed and considered as Emma diligently took notes. Together they crafted points of dialogue that positioned Jake not as a rebel but as a visionary, a change agent fighting for a more equitable work environment. "But what if Caldwell finds out?" Emma's question interjected a moment of silence. "He'll find out what I want him to," Jake said, a tinge of defiance sparking in his voice. "He can't control ideas. Ideas have a life of their own." Emma leaned back, admiration evident in her eyes. Yet, his statement reflected a dawning realization as Jake recognized the subtle shift within himself. Ideas, when backed by collective strength, became an infectious force capable of overthrowing complacency. As they organized their covert meetings, Jake felt the atmosphere around him shift subtly. Every interaction with Emma strengthened his resolve. Every small exchange and careful word planned reinforced the network binding them in the pursuit of their shared ambitions. However, hours later, as they stood to leave, a sudden chill crept over him. Caldwell would not be someone easily outmaneuvered. His reactions were unpredictable, and retaliation loomed high on the horizon. "We have no guarantees," Emma murmured, as if she could sense his rising anxiety. "Whatever comes next could shake the foundation of everything." Jake's heart pounded. The realization that they were entering a dangerous game stirred an even deeper urgency within him. He needed to act fast, but the stakes of his choices hung like a looming shadow. What would be his next decisive move? How far was he willing to go to realize a vision that could so easily slip through his grasp? The concept of collective change materialized at the edge of his thoughts, but the deeper question remained. With the stakes this high, who would be willing to follow him into the unknown? The burgeoning challenge of orchestrating this rebellion cradled him as he stepped out into the night air, leaving the warmth of hope behind. And in that uncertainty, he realized he would soon have to confront Caldwell directly in an inevitable clash that could alter the trajectory of his ambitions. The question now loomed, was he truly ready to face the man who had held power over him for so long? The following day dawned with a sense of electric anticipation crackling in Jake's veins. He woke with a singular focus. Today would mark the beginning of his collaboration with Ellen and Carl. Each detail of the plan he forged with Emma resurfaced in his mind. He pictured the meeting room, subtle exchanges coded with significance amidst the mundane chatter of office life. His agenda was clear: he needed to plant the seeds of dissent while cultivating a shared vision. The weight of his resolve pressed heavily upon him. He wanted to rise above his fears and build a platform for collective ambition. However, as he dressed, a knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. What if Caldwell's reach was longer than he imagined? Jake paced his modest apartment, glancing at the clock. Time was slipping through his fingers. He reminded himself to remain grounded, to breathe, but the urgency within him was insistent and demanding. Would his colleagues align with his ambitions, or would their fears suffocate the spark of potential he felt burgeoning within? The office loomed ahead, a fortress of anticipation. He found solace in the routine, the elevator ascent, the muted buzz of office machinery, the familiar faces that occasionally flickered with smiles or frowns. Today, though, he moved through the hallways with pinpoint determination. His first meeting was with Ellen in the break room, a space insidiously mundane yet fractally rich with potential. "Hey, Ellen," Jake greeted her, forcing a casual tone. Their conversation began with pleasantries, but beneath his surface warmth, a pulse of excitement warbled. "Jake, has something changed? You seem different," she remarked, curiosity glimmering in her eyes. He smiled, but felt the sincerity of her observation. In that moment, he realized he was shedding his old skin. "I've been thinking about our environment, the culture here. It can't stay stagnant forever. Don't you feel that?" Ellen's brows knitted together, contemplative. "Yeah, absolutely. It's been frustrating," she conceded, her voice growing firmer. Jake took a deep breath, seizing the moment. "What if we work together on some ideas? I'm gathering a small group aimed at suggesting changes, improvements. You'd be a key player." He sensed her hesitation, the flicker of doubt passing over her features. "It could be risky, Jake. Caldwell's not the type to take kindly to dissent." "I know," he acknowledged, desperation creeping into his voice. "But consider the alternative. We can't just exist in complacency." Ellen paused for what felt like an eternity, her expression shifting as though she were weighing the concepts of rebellion and growth on a scale she had not anticipated. "I'm in," she finally replied, a determined light igniting in her eyes. Fueled by her affirmation, Jake turned to Carl with newfound confidence, positioning himself not merely as a colleague, but as a catalyst for change. The conversation with Carl flowed more easily, his familiar banter warming the air around them. The tension of secrecy felt electric, crackling with potential. As they gathered in a small conference room, he began unrolling ideas he was sure would set the groundwork for something special. Each proposal sparked debates, illuminating shared frustrations and potential solutions. Slowly but surely, the group gelled, a collective of discontent assembled, each member invigorated by shared purpose. However, with each collaborative idea shared, Jake felt the shadows of paranoia settle like a weighty fog around them. Caldwell's presence loomed large, the possibility of exposure a specter at the edges of their discussions. The thought forced Jake to confront a chilling truth: the closer they drew to action, the closer they drew to danger. By the end of their brainstorming session, a plan was taking shape, a plan that felt both liberating and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a precipice, staring down into the unknown. As they stepped out of the conference room, Jake's mind raced with possibilities and consequences. How would Caldwell respond if he learned of their intentions? Would he retaliate with the ruthless precision that Jake had come to expect? Feeling his heart thump heavily in his chest, Jake resolved to stay vigilant, aware that trust was both a beacon and a potential pitfall. One misstep could unravel their momentum. But this was a beginning, a fragile yet promising start to a revolution against the regime stifling their potential. What Jake didn't yet know was that Caldwell had been watching him closely, waiting for the moment when rebellion would reveal its true face, one that might not belong to him at all. The days that followed were a kaleidoscope of emotion and imminent danger. With awareness of Caldwell's looming presence, Jake felt a heightened sense of urgency mingling with paranoia as he worked to solidify the new alliance. Each morning he walked into the office, the weight of their mission hung thick in the air, but so did an unshakable resolve to forge ahead. He met regularly with Ellen and Carl, their groups swiftly gaining momentum as they exchanged ideas and strategies. In these clandestine meetings, Jake found himself transforming. No longer just a worker in a corporate machine, he became a strategist, a leader amongst his peers. The sight of the three of them huddled together over crudely drawn diagrams and scattered notes ignited a fire within him that he had never felt before. It was intoxicating yet terrifying. However, the deeper they delved into their plans, the more Jake wrestled with his own self-doubt. Was he truly capable of leading this charge, or was he merely a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding? Each time the phone rang with an unknown number, A chill raced down his spine as he questioned whether Caldwell was onto them. One evening, after a session that had spiraled from creative brainstorming to heated argument over risks, Jake lingered alone in the dimly lit conference room, traces of frustration painting his features. The air was thick, saturated with the scent of stale coffee and the echoes of his colleagues' passionate voices. He sank into a chair, staring at the disorganized notes, mentally replaying the past week's discussions. What if their efforts came to nothing? What if their bold moves pushed Caldwell's hand sooner than anticipated? The thoughts clawed at him unrelentingly. As the clock ticked past 5, he rifled through the chaotic papers strewn across the table, searching for clarity, something to reignite the growing flame. He paused, his hand grazing over a crumpled sheet that contained a few words penned in haste: transparency, trust, challenge, empower. Each word leaped from the page, hitting him with a sense of purpose he desperately needed. In that moment of solitude, Jake realized he had not just been gathering support, he had been laying the groundwork for something much deeper: true empowerment. They were fighting not merely to change Caldwell's reign but to empower themselves and their fellow co-workers. This was beyond just dissent. It was about unlocking human potential stifled by fear. He sat up straighter, emboldened by his revelation. It was time to redefine their mission, to infuse it with a message of growth and liberation rather than solely rebellion. He grabbed a pen, jotting down a few key phrases that encapsulated his newfound clarity. The following morning, Jake convened another meeting with Ellen and Carl, brimming with energy and a refreshed sense of direction. As he laid out his revised vision, he caught glimpses of their awestruck expressions, reminiscent of how he had felt only days earlier. Think about it: what if we frame our proposals as a push for transparency in our processes? Not just for us, but standardizing practices throughout the company, he proposed passionately, buoyed by the electricity of possibility. Giving people the tools to voice their ideas is powerful, Ellen responded, nodding in agreement. If we can create a space where everyone feels like they can contribute, it doesn't just challenge Caldwell. It inspires a whole culture shift, Carl added, the excitement palpable in his voice. Even as they rallied around this new ambition, Jake's earlier trepidation lingered. Would Caldwell view this reframing as a threat or a benign initiative? With every shred of hope his evolving vision ignited, there remained an undercurrent of apprehension. Caldwell's awareness was still an unyielding presence in his thoughts. Just as they finished mapping their refined strategy, Jake received a text that sent an icy tremor through him. "We need to talk." Caldwell's aware of your little group. A surge of dread gripped him. The game had shifted. The confrontation he had been instinctively avoiding was no longer an abstract possibility but a glaring, immediate reality. Jake's stomach churned with the weight of impending action. In that moment he understood. The time had come to face the consequences of his choices, and the true test of his leadership was just beginning. What awaited them on the other side of this confrontation? Jake's pulse pounded in his ears as he sat motionless, staring at his phone. The words, "Caldwell's aware," echoed ominously in his mind, feeding the relentless churn of anxiety in his core. He glanced at Ellen and Carl, who were locked in hushed discussion, unaware of the internal storm raging within him. This was no longer just strategy. We were all on the edge, balancing precariously between empowerment and rebellion. Realizing he couldn't keep the news from them, he cleared his throat and called for their attention. "I just got a text from someone who knows about our plans. Caldwell is on to us," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. A gravity-filled silence followed as Ellen's eyes widened while Carl's expression fell. The room, once buzzing with excitement, now felt like the walls were closing in around them. "What do we do?" Ellen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake met her gaze, the fear mirrored in her eyes stirring something within him, a mix of determination and purpose. "We keep moving forward. This is our moment to act, but we have to be smart about it." As they brainstormed their approach, Jake's mind raced through every possible scenario. Was it time to shift the focus? Strengthening their emerging culture of transparency might be the key to mitigating any potential backlash. They needed to show Caldwell that they weren't plotting against him, but rather, seeking improvement for everyone. In that moment, Jake found a flicker of conviction. We can't lose sight of our mission. It's about more than just taking down the old guard. It's about creating a better environment for everyone, starting with a presentation to the leadership team. We'll highlight our ideas as beneficial for the entire company, he proposed, his voice growing stronger with each word that left his lips. Carl and Ellen exchanged glances, the initial hesitation shifting to collaborative energy. They began brainstorming the presentation, focusing on the positive implications of transparency and inclusivity, intermingling their fears with hope. As he engaged more with his colleagues, Jake could feel his self-doubt melting away, replaced with a clearer vision. The act of communicating his ideas effectively transformed him. He could feel the weight of leadership resting on his shoulders not as a burden, but as a crucial role that he was meant to embody. Despite the fact that Caldwell now loomed as a daunting adversary, Jake gradually realized how much he had grown. His skill set expanded, turning strategic thinking into tactical execution, and fear into resolve. The next day, they gathered in the large conference room, their presentation meticulously crafted, underscoring the concept of a new operational framework. Each slide echoed their mission, to build an engaging culture within the company that challenged Caldwell's regime without directly confronting it. Jake stood at the helm, his voice unwavering as he articulated their vision to a room filled with senior executives, Caldwell included. His mind was a storm of potential consequences, but he did not falter. Instead, the collective effort of his team became a shield against the dread of confrontation itself. As he approached a concluding slide titled, "Empowerment, the Future of Our Company," Jake watched inquisitively for Caldwell's reaction, searching for signs of irritation or acceptance. Would the chaos that lingered just beneath the surface break free, or could it signal a new dawn for their corporate environment? Suddenly, Caldwell's icy stare pierced through the room, intensifying the immediate tension. "Interesting perspective," Caldwell declared, though his tone lacked sincerity. "Are you sure you can handle the repercussions of such a radical shift?" Jake inhaled deeply, the moment crystallizing into one of realization. He had come too far to retract. "We can handle it, as long as everyone is on board." The message was clear, unified. They could no longer be easily dismissed as mere underlings. The battle line had been drawn, but would their stand prompt a turning point or provoke a fatal backlash? As Jake exited the conference room, a knot of anticipation twisted in his stomach. If they had stepped onto the battlefield, then the eventual clash with Caldwell was now inevitable. What he didn't know was how deep the repercussions would run or what costs would come to light when they confronted the true nature of personal leadership. The game was changing, but it wasn't just about Caldwell anymore. It was about what Jake would become, and what sacrifices he would face in the name of authenticity and empowerment. The true confrontation was only beginning, and he wasn't sure he could predict the outcome. The hum of fluorescent lights cast a stark glow on the conference room table, a reflection of Jake's heightened sense of urgency. As he stepped outside, his mind spun with swirling thoughts. The weight of his words lingered in the air like a challenge thrown into the void, and he couldn't help but wonder if they had stirred something far more dangerous than anticipated. The anticipation of Caldwell's response gnawed at him. Would he respond with aggression, or would he attempt to undermine their efforts subtly? Jake had always prided himself on his ability to read people, but Caldwell was a master of manipulation, cloaked in a facade of control. This presented a new battlefield where emotional intelligence could either lead them to victory or prove devastatingly inadequate. In the following days, Jake found himself more aware of his surroundings, absorbing the atmosphere within the office like a sponge. Conversations felt heavy with undercurrents of uncertainty, colleagues casting wary looks at one another. Shadows of doubt swirled around, and he realized how crucial it was for him to embody the strength he wished to inspire in others. He had ignited a flame of hope, but now he had to ensure it didn't burn out. "Jake, can we talk?" Ellen approached him in the break room, lacing her fingers together, as if bracing herself for impact. "Of course," he replied, inviting her to sit beside him. "Do you think we should prepare a contingency plan?" she asked, her brow furrowing with worry. "What if Caldwell retaliates?" A pang of discomfort tightened in Jake's chest. It was one thing to charge into uncertain territory filled with resolve. It was another to plan for potential failure. It's possible, he conceded, but we can't let fear dictate our next steps. We have to stay focused on our vision. Ella nodded, but her uncertainty was palpable. Sometimes I wonder if we're really ready for this, she admitted. Jake paused, searching for the right words. Readiness isn't about certainty. It's about courage, having the guts to act even when the outcome is unknown. We owe it to ourselves to push forward. The intensity of their conversation hung silently between them, and for the first time, Jake felt the weight of leadership in stark clarity. He questioned how often he had succumbed to self-doubt, how many opportunities he had let slip away because of his fear of failure. In that moment, it became evident that every encounter, every decision, could teach him about his own limitations, potential, and ultimately, his growth. In the days that followed, Jake immersed himself in his work, forging ahead with newfound determination but also revealing unexpected vulnerabilities. He took the initiative to organize informal meetings where employees could voice their concerns, ensuring they understood that their opinions mattered. Each session taught him to balance empathy with decisiveness, requiring him to confront uncomfortable truths about the culture he was trying to change. The job had always felt demanding, but the stakes now felt monumental. As he navigated this turbulent period, he often caught himself wrestling between ambition and anxiety. Had he sparked a progressive movement, or was he merely being naive about the risks involved? Each day became a lesson, and the realization dawned on him: leadership was not about being invulnerable. It was about recognizing one's own fears and transforming them into strength. Just as Jake felt he was beginning to establish control, Caldwell arranged a meeting with him. The request came unexpectedly, with the underlying message clear: there was no escaping their intricate chess game. As the hour approached, Jake's pulse raced once more, a tempest of thoughts swirling chaotically in his mind. What cards did Caldwell hold? Why was there an invitation instead of a confrontation? Whatever was coming, Jake could sense an unseen danger lurking in the back shadows. As he prepared to face Caldwell, he sensed the pivotal moment looming close. This wasn't just a question of professional development. It was about self-definition, measuring up to the demands of leadership, and standing firm in the face of uncertainty. What revelations awaited him? And would he emerge from this confrontation with his identity intact? Or would Caldwell shatter the vision he had worked so hard to build? Jake's heart raced as he stepped into Caldwell's lavish office. The walls were adorned with trophies of past victories, remnants of a ruthless empire built on shrewdness and steadfast control. Each tick of the clock seemed to amplify his anxiety, reminding him that he was stepping into the lion's den without the comfort of a safety net. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a reckoning. Caldwell looked up from a stack of documents, his steely gaze piercing through the veneer of Jake's newfound confidence. "You have quite a lot of nerve, Jake," he began, his tone a calculated mix of amusement and threat. "Challenging the norm, rallying your colleagues, it's bold, but naive. You do realize that the lifeblood of this company flows from the decisions I make?" Taking a deep breath, Jake felt the weight of the moment press down on him. "I do understand. But with respect, Mr. Caldwell, ignoring the voices of our employees is a fast track to irrelevance. We can choose to innovate together or face the consequences of stagnation." Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his expression inscrutable. "And you think you can lead this charge? A mechanic from the suburbs?" Jake squared his shoulders, an unexpected warmth of resolve coursing through him. "If my life as a mechanic has taught me anything, it's that every small part matters. Just like the people in this company. Ignoring their needs will dismantle the whole system." The atmosphere grew tense, the air crackling with the confrontation of egos. Caldwell narrowed his eyes, evaluating Jake, and then chuckled darkly. "You think you've got the blueprint for change? What if I say going public with these ideas will get your career removed from the table? Or better yet, I could terminate your position on a whim, and your little movement will be snuffed out like a candle in the wind." In that moment, Jake recognized the pivotal juncture. It was time to act. If you choose that path, you only validate everything we're advocating against. This movement isn't just me, It unifies the aspirations of my colleagues. I must ask, what legacy do you want to leave behind? Fear or empowerment? The silence that followed was taut, everyone present feeling the gravity of his words. Caldwell leaned back, seeming to contemplate the unexpected strength in Jake's conviction. You really believe this could reshape company dynamics? He questioned, a hint of intrigue creeping into his voice. I don't just believe it, I'm determined to show that genuine engagement drives true productivity. We're ready to present a structured proposal focused on transparency, trust, and shared goals that benefit everyone, including you. Caldwell's visage darkened, but it was no longer an arrogant dismissal. It transformed into an evaluation of strategic confrontation. You have one chance to prove this is more than just naive idealism. Jake walked out of that meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. Confronting Caldwell hadn't just tested his resolve, it redirected him towards action rooted in authenticity. The fear he'd harbored began to dissipate like fog on a summer's morning. In the days that followed, the alliance he had forged with Ellen and Carl grew stronger. They meticulously crafted their presentation reflecting the collective aspirations of their team. As they prepared, Jake reveled in the shift. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a visionary, someone with the potential to influence not only his life but the lives of his colleagues as well. Finally, the day arrived for their presentation. The trio stood before the executive board, the tension swirling like a palpable entity. With each slide, Jake felt the adrenaline bolster his confidence. This was more than a business proposal. It was a manifesto born from empathy and the courage to empower others to voice their aspirations. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake began, his voice steady as he presented their vision. What we offer is a structural change that relies on the strength of our collective experiences. When transparency guides our actions, trust flourishes, and we create a culture where every employee is engaged and valued. You cannot measure this success only in numbers. The room remained silent, Caldwell's piercing gaze fixed on Jake, but the energy surrounding him was electrifying. Ellen and Carl exchanged glances, emboldened by Jake's words. The narrative was now shifting. It wasn't just about survival, it was about revolutionizing the way they functioned as a cohesive unit. Minutes rolled past like waves at the beach, washing over every face in the room. Eventually, Caldwell broke the silence, his expression unreadable. Interesting, but you would need tremendous support from all layers of management to make this work. Can you galvanize that kind of momentum? Absolutely. Jake sensed that the tide was turning. We have support from our team and the commitment to engage every level of this company. We've only just begun. Caldwell looked at him, his expression granite-like, but a flicker of respect passed through the air. It was there and gone, like a fleeting shadow. As their meeting concluded, Jake realized that no matter the outcome, he had conquered his fears and confronted his biggest adversary, not just Caldwell, but the doubts that had once tricked him into believing he was powerless. He had transformed into someone who could challenge the status quo, someone who harnessed the dreams of others to shape a more equitable reality. Emma's presence lingered in his mind as he reveled in this newfound identity. A sense of solid confidence washed over him. He was not merely standing on the precipice of change, he was becoming a catalyst for it. The garage mechanic, once burdened by doubt, now was an architect of hope solidified by the affirmation of purpose-driven action. Hiding behind a veil of uncertainty had ceased to be an option. Jake had stripped away the layers that had shielded him from embracing both his strengths and vulnerabilities. The transformation was not merely professional. It was personal, a reclamation of agency and authenticity that would ripple outward to impact everyone around him. This battle was just the beginning. He knew challenges were still to come. But now he stood with solid ground beneath his feet, emboldened to pave the way. He had achieved something not just for himself but for every individual who feared they lacked a voice, a reminder that true power resides in authenticity, and the courage to acknowledge all that one can become. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for these uplifting stories of personal overcoming. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and amplify the impact. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.